So much for watching. You know, in today's program, we've invited Dr. Barry Bussey to join us once again, and we're going to have a discussion around issues of the law and how they intersect with religion, the importance of the Charter, and all kinds of, I think, important issues that you and I as Canadians need to be made aware of. And I can't think of a better person to translate all of that legal terminology and into layman's terms than Dr. Bussey. So Dr. Bussey, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Bill.
Oh, it's always great to have you with us. And for the benefit of those that maybe are joining us for the very first time, why don't you give us a quick bio of who you are? And
yeah, well, I've been a lawyer for, I don't know, 30 some odd years now, it seems, but from Newfoundland originally. We moved back up here to Ontario in '96. Been involved with a lot of charities as in-house lawyer, in-house counsel we call it. And then about almost a year ago, started up First Freedoms Foundation, which is an organization that is primarily focused on freedom of speech, freedom of religion and conscience, and the inviolability of the person, which means basically the government can't just come and take you and pull you off the street and put you in jail without the proper rule of law, as it were. So it's those are areas that we are addressing, but of course, many areas will, coalesce around those three major points.
if folks wanted to contact you, is there a website?
Yes, yeah, firstfreedoms.ca. And you'll find all kinds of information there, our blog, but we also have our own Freedom Feature program where I interview with a lot of different policymakers, lawyers, law professors, journalists, pastors, talking about the issues dealing with law and religion, but also law and public policy as it deals with freedom of speech and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous work you're doing. I would encourage our viewers to check it out. If you go to our page, our website, l4ltv.com, under the previous programs tab, there is a link directly to First Freedoms Foundation. I would encourage all of our viewers to check that out and to support it. To support your group, because I think I think there has to be more an awareness. I think we as Canadians have been a little complacent. I mean, I can speak for myself only.
Yeah.
Always assuming that the freedoms that, I'm 60 years old, right? So as far back as I can remember, that these freedoms that I've had to express myself and to move around within this country and work and, were pretty much
a given.
A given, yeah. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And over the last couple of years, I'm not a lawyer. As a pastor, I've been concerned. And when one of the reasons why we've had you on, a little bit more frequently is because and so I always appreciate your take on this and the awareness that you create. That we as Canadians need to be aware of what the Charter is, what the role of government is, what the role of the judiciary is, and if things are being misinterpreted or not, that we need to be active. We need to be and we've been way too passive.
It's kind of in the Canadian DNA almost. We've been very passive as a people when it comes to government. We have the assumption that government is good, right? Peace, order, and good government. That's written right in our Constitution. And by and large, in many ways, government is good.
Right.
But we've got to recognize that our freedoms does not come from government. It's an inalienable right to us as human beings. We have freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and so forth.
In other words, those first freedoms.
Those first freedoms.
Yeah.
And on those first freedoms, the other reason why we call it First Freedoms Foundation is because those freedoms actually have made possible other freedoms.
Got it.
Right? You know, freedom of speech, for example, is so crucial. I mean, we may disagree on something, but as long as I will allow you to speak your mind, even though I disagree with you, it is in that interaction that we can have further discussion and being able to find out what the truth of whatever the issue is that we're discussing.
True.
And what's going on today, Bill, that's very disturbing, is that we've got a mindset that has come in through the academia, i.e., you know, the professors and so forth at the universities, in you know, all the law schools, in the media, in government, and all of the various civic organizations that are activists for one cause or another, but particularly with the so-called progressive ideologies. And you know, progressive sounds great, right?
Yes.
Because it's progress.
Right.
Well, in my view, it's not progress. Because what's happening is they're cutting down on free speech. And that is never progress. If we cut back on free speech, we're not going to be able to just be able to understand the world in which we live.
Right.
We're not going to even be able to understand who we are as human beings. Right now, the definition of a human being is up for grabs.
Right.
You know, we got all of this talk about, you know, interfacing with the human body, with computers, with all kinds of, you name it, right? We're in a very serious situation where we don't even know who we are as human beings, and so we need to have that debate. But what's happening is that debate is being stifled.
Right.
And you know, we talk about terms, okay, progressive. Talk about another one is woke. The idea here is that you awaken to a new reality, or you know, kind of like the blinders are taken off your eyes, and now you can see what's going on. All of the oppression that goes on, and what's happening is that in many ways, victimization is being applauded in the sense that if you're a victim, you go up higher on the scale. So you get more government programs and all of these kinds of things. And I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. And I'm just, you know, we don't have a whole lot of time to get into it. But the point of the matter is that we've got this progressive ideology. Now, there is a concept in politics known as the Overton window. The Overton window is kind of like that which is considered acceptable in political discussion.
Okay.
All right. So, in other words, if you go too far over here to the left, okay, well, no, that's unacceptable. Okay. You go too far over here, that's unacceptable. But there's this happy medium. The problem is the Overton window is being shifting back and forth.
Got it.
So now the progressive ideology, the ideology that says, you know, that you know, gender is up for grabs, that all of the traditional ideas and views of what it means to be human as far as the, you know, the Judeo-Christian understanding, for example. All of these things are now being questioned, but questioned so that if you hold a view that's different from the progressive ideology, you're wrong. And not only are you wrong, you should not even be given an opportunity to be able to speak. And so therefore, you don't have freedom of speech. And as a result of this kind of mindset, we're seeing freedoms getting less and less. And, you know, we're absolutely naive if we think that if we lose our freedom of speech, well, you know, government is good, it's going to treat us well, and all the rest. Well, that is very naive.
Right.
History tells us that that's not the case.
Exactly.
Like, if we have to be relying upon government for our freedoms, our freedom of speech is not something that government grants us. It's something that we have as an inalienable right to us as a person. Now, our philosophical understanding of the world that really gave us the charter was a philosophy known as liberalism.
Okay.
And liberalism came up as a result of, okay, so if you think of back in history real quick, we've got the Reformation, right? So there's a whole big religious debate and discussion, and then we get into the struggles between government and religious communities and the fights that went on, the literal bloodshed on the fields of Europe. And then we come into what they call the Enlightenment period, where we go for a very secular mindset. Let's get religion out of politics. Let's get religion out of the state. And but in essence, the Enlightenment nevertheless had these basic moral views that were very much mirrored on the Christian experience, the Judeo-Christian experience. But yet it was secular in approach. Then from there, we got into a liberal philosophical understanding. So we come into our modern age of democracy, where you get increasing of the suffrage for people to vote, men, women, and individuals who are, reach an age of 21, or now it's 18 and whatever. But there was this idea that you would maximize the individual freedom as much as you can.
Okay.
While maintaining civil peace.
Right.
Okay, that then is how we got our charter. So all of the values of the charter have a long history, have a long historical point of view. And so if you look at the charter, you get these kinds of statements. From the very beginning, the preamble says, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And, there's a big debate within the legal faculties. What does supremacy of God mean? And, there's all kinds of arguments that are being made on that. Some say, well, it really means that the law needs to be humble and recognize that the law in and of itself is not the end and be all.
Okay.
But that there is something outside.
Right.
So then that gives us back to our thoughts with respect to natural law and, the inalienable rights of individuals, that kind of thing. And inalienable rights of individuals became extremely popular after World War II because of the Holocaust and all that went on. But prior to the Charter, we had the Bill of Rights in 1960.
Okay.
And in 1960, listen to this. In 1960, the preamble, which is 4 paragraphs long, but I'm going to read just a wee bit of it, because this came into law in 1960, and it doesn't have constitutional significance in the sense that it only governs federal regulated regulations, law, and that stuff, right? It doesn't deal with the provinces and all the rest. But, and it was Diefenbaker's attempt to try to bring in a Bill of Rights. But it wasn't constitutionally entrenched like the Charter is. And so here's what it says. The Parliament of Canada affirming that the Canadian nation is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God. So you see the language of the Charter has some history to it.
Exactly.
Right? And there was this understanding of this notion of supremacy of God.
Right.
Well, we have gone so far beyond that, it's not even funny. It says here, the dignity and worth of the human person and the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions. I particularly love that kind of language that comes out of the Bill of Rights, the Canadian Bill of Rights. Okay, coming back now, as I mentioned on the last program, the Charter acts as a buffer between the state and the individual.
Right.
It's this asymmetrical relationship, right? It's this vertical relationship. Okay. Now, what's extremely important for us to understand is that in the Charter itself, it says in Section 1, it says the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society.
Okay.
All right. So what that does is that allows the judges to determine what is the reasonable limit to the right.
Okay.
Because no right is absolute. I mean, if I have a right for freedom of religion, well, I don't have the right to decide that my religion says that I drive on the left-hand side of the road, right? There is a reasonable limit to my right. Okay, but the judges now get to decide that. But if we are now in a, historically, when the, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we would have decisions that would be made by courts. There was, the courts in Canada in particular were known as to be very, very careful not to stray into public policy.
Okay.
Okay? And so they would make a very strict interpretation of the law. Well, what's happened is since the charter has come in, the courts have been jumping right into public policy. And so as a result, they are making decisions that affect us on the ground every year, right? They're making these decisions.
Right.
But they get to determine what the reasonable limit is.
Right.
And how you determine what the reasonable limit is going to be dependent upon your philosophy of life, on your understanding, your ideological positioning.
Right.
And so when you've got this progressive ideology, which is currently in vogue, you now got a situation where if you are not progressive, you're wrong. Okay? And so therefore, to be neutral is now to be progressive.
Got it.
And so then the judges are making these decisions based on a very secular ideological position.
Yes.
This progressive mindset.
Yes.
So that is where we are, and this is why it's becoming very, very concerning. So for example, in the last program you had said, well, okay, so if I'm a member of a religious community and, should my right to religious freedom be dependent on what my religious community says on whatever the issue is? And you use the issue of vaccine, right? Well, the courts have said, no, it's that of the right of the individual, right? That's how it's been. But now with this progressive mindset, our identity, whether we're male or female or whatever other gender, if we are from a particular race, if we're from, you name the identity, that then determines as to whether or not we are victims or we are minorities that need special protections. And so then issues of equality come in. And right now, in the courts, the issue of equality it's a Section 15 right, but it is one of the ones that is most sensitive. The courts are making more and more decisions based on equality. So, if you've got a law school or a Christian university that wants to have a law school, like we did with Trinity Western, then the fact that Trinity Western has a view on marriage that is a traditional view of marriage, of one man and one woman, then just having that alone is enough to say that no, it's okay for the government regulator, i.e. the Law Society, to say no, this violates the charter values, which is kind of like the spirit of the charter, and therefore you shouldn't get it. So in other words, you're wrong in that view, right? And because you're wrong in that view, you're not entitled to any government recognition, i.e. as a licensed law school. So that is where we are and why it's so difficult right now for many people as we're trying to understand. It's very difficult to understand why is it, if we have the charter, that we would have a situation where that charter right is not being being recognized. And so it becomes a huge, big, massive debate. And certainly, judges have a lot on their plate trying to figure it all out. But it's the philosophical understanding that goes behind right now that helps interpret the Charter. I can assure you that if the Charter existed 100 years ago, it would be interpreted very differently from the way it is today. Now, a lot of the progressives would say, well, yes, of course, because
we've evolved.
We have gone way beyond the racist and misogynist ideas of the past. We're now, we're further advanced. But the question is, if we're not going to allow some of the basics, i.e. freedom of speech, then how far advanced are we? And I think it's open for debate, but I can tell you right now that a lot of people across this country are afraid to open their mouth, are afraid to debate because they do not want to get caught up in this, in this whole backlash that's going on.
You recently spoke to Brian Peckford.
Yes.
Who is, I think, the only living, what are they called?
So he was a signer of the Charter back in 1982.
What is his take on what he's...
Well, listen, he's just like, I find his understanding of the Charter very fascinating, right? Because he would say that that's Section 1 argument that the courts are using. He said that was only supposed to be used in extreme circumstances.
You would think, yeah.
Right? And he said it wasn't supposed to be used on every single case.
Right.
Which is quite phenomenal, really, to make that argument. And it's certainly not one that, as I went through law school, that we were even, like, it wasn't even in our minds. Or like the professors never ever taught that. But, he maintains that's what it was when they were discussing the Charter. But again, you see, the Charter from the very beginning now has the courts use the term living tree. The Constitution is like a living tree.
Oh,
and so as the society changes, and we've got to allow the Constitution to grow.
Right.
But what happens is that those living tree analogy allows the judges to actually, in many ways, make amendments to the Constitution without going through the amending formula.
Exactly.
Because they have that much power. See, so that's where the struggle goes in. So this is a huge debate, and we need to have a discussion. We need to keep talking it.
Yes.
And lots of people will say, well, the religious people or people who have these traditional conservative views, you're wrong, and therefore you should. No. We need to have a debate. We need to continue the discussion.
Yeah, I always found it fascinating that our Charter begins with how would be the circumstance for it not to be applied.
Yeah.
It starts right off with that, right?
Yeah.
In these conditions, it would not be applied. But as a layperson, I always thought too that would be the exception, and not the
rule.
The rule.
As a
rule.
Yeah.
And the rule. And so there's so much more.
There's a lot.
There's so much more we could talk about. But thank you. Thank you for bringing awareness to us.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining it in a way that a lay person like me can understand it. And I always end these programs a little bit more anxious because I realize that the situation is more dire than maybe we're aware of.
Yeah, and we need to be thinking about, okay, what now? Right. How do we live in this environment that we find ourselves?
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bussey. Let's pray. Gracious God, loving Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so much for everything you do for us, how you love us, you're so gracious and merciful towards us, you forgive us. And Father, you have given each and every one of us these freedoms, these rights. And we just humbly ask that you continue to guide our nation, the decision makers, the politicians, the judges, that these freedoms may be preserved and we may be a nation that glorifies you. Thank you for loving us, and bless each and every viewer, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we've come to the end of another Lessons for Living television program. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you're enjoying these programs on religious liberty and the Charter and all of these important issues that we as Canadians, I think, need to pay closer attention to. And I want to thank Dr. Bussey for joining us again and
Great to be here.
helping us with some clarity on those. Just remind folks again of First Freedoms Foundation and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so First Freedoms Foundation is www.firstfreedoms.ca.
There will be a link on our website on our previous programs page. Just go there. There's a link. It'll take you straight to First Freedoms Foundation. Check that out, the interviews, the blog. Make a donation to help keep these important organizations alive that keep these issues top of mind for Canadians. So important. Want to remind you of a couple of other things. Our Instagram page, and follow me on Instagram, Santos_Bill. Every morning, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we put out a 1-minute devotional video. Great way to get your day started, focused on things of heaven. Check that out, Instagram, Santos_Bill. Like our Facebook page. Go to our website, lessonsforlivingtelevision.com, L4LTV.com. You can check out where we're going to be appearing live. You can even make a donation. There's a Donate Today tab, and we are a charitable organization, so any donation you make is eligible for a receipt for income tax purposes. We are all out of time. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you'll be back again next time. God bless you. We'll see you back here soon.